The prompt for me for this presentation was that a lot of people have been talking about testing and what it means, and the sorts of discussions I've been having with people on a day-to-day basis about testing has changed. I started off my career working on flight safety critical systems, testing through VAX VMS. I've then worked in all sorts of business, from GISs where they had an object-orientated database, so inheritance models in data, phenomenal, clever stuff. I wasn't clever, but they were. Through to trading systems, working for startups, working for banks, working and providing advisory work to all sorts of organisations, big and small, new, old, needing to change. And my current role is as the delivery director for Infuse. So I spend a lot of my time going out to clients, talking to them about what they're doing. So this is all based on things that I am seeing, hearing and talking to people about at the moment. So it's, some of it you may think, what? It's actually stuff that's going on out there at the moment. So as an introduction, what I'm going to talk about is that, and it's been the theme right throughout this morning, hasn't it, about how things are changing. Things always have changed. That's not, I'm not saying anything new here. Scott was saying, in the 1980s, they were talking about how systems were changing and delivery mechanisms were changing. The thing that I think is changing is the speed that things accelerate at. And I'll talk about that in a moment. And then the final point is that as testers, we need to adapt. The way we did testing 20, 30 years ago, up until about 5 years ago, still applied. Past 5 years, things have changed significantly, and I'll talk about that. So, what are some of the influences? What is changing out there? I've just focused on 4 key things. Let's start with structure. We've gone from having everything in-house, client-server systems, internal IT departments with racks of servers sitting in the corner of the room, through to highly distributed systems, including Internet of Things. You might have, instead of one device, you may have many millions of devices. You've got multiple RFID chips, all producing information which needs to be covered at multiple points throughout the journey of a product. All of these systems are interconnected, different languages, different locations, different operating systems. The level of change, the way that IT is structured, is fundamentally changing. The technology, we're going from mainframe systems. By the way, I was asked recently to help fill 3 roles where they wanted to do automated testing on a mainframe system, and organisations are still using mainframes. And there's a good reason for that, in that these systems are good, they are reliable, they're a known entity, and people will continue using them. But a similar organisation has got both mainframes, and then at the other end of it, they're moving into a thing called AngularJS as a way of handling their UI. So this is dynamic web pages that are rendered onto your screen, and there's a framework around it that supports it. It makes automation quite hard. But AngularJS has only really sort of come to the fore in the past year. But year and a half ago, I had lots of conversations talking to people about the move to APIs, testing of the UI is dead, automated testing of the UI is dead. Along comes AngularJS a few months later, and then everybody's going, we need to test through the UI, we need to do automated testing through the UI. So things are not just changing year upon year, it's changing within months. the speed that things are changing. I don't like to think of myself as old, but hailing a taxi now seems old school. I mean, what, 3-4 years ago, you would either phone up for a minicab or you'd hail somebody on the street. Now, people rarely think about actually even hailing a taxi, they'll go to Uber. So within 3-4 years, the behaviour of a large number of people who are not technical is to use technology. It's not to say that other things have gone, but the prevalence and the speed that that happens is phenomenal. I'm now hearing that with the Uber probably has a lifespan of about another 10-15 years before automated cars come in, and then rather than having to hail a taxi, you just hail the nearest car to you, and that car will automatically drive you to where you need to go. Now, that 20 years ago sounded like science fiction. People are talking about the reality of doing that. And that speed of change is scary. Cost. So, it used to be we'd have a 3 to 5 year programme of work worth X millions of pounds. You know, you need a team of about 120, 200 odd people to do it, and you would get one deliverable at the end. Good sequential model, bang, off you go. I would argue that a lot of sequential models have worked in the past, continue to work. And when I asked the recent conference about how many people were moving to DevOps, I asked the question, how many people would never move to Agile, let alone DevOps? And about half a dozen hands came up in an audience of 100. And for those organisations, that works for them. But the reality and the business reality is that things need to happen quickly. And people aren't prepared to invest huge amounts of money. They want to see a return on investment very, very quickly. So, long gone are the days, I'll mention this a bit, about going through your tiered approach to testing. You've now got to do everything in one go. We'll talk about this. And then finally, robotics. Something I'm very interested in, because I think that robots will take over a lot of testing as well. I've got some ideas gelling up that I might put together into paper about that. But they again will remove a lot of it. Test automation is part of roboticising testing. There's some other aspects that we can start thinking about as well. So all of this adds up to change. And it's reality, it's what's happening now. So what's been the business response? Well, businesses have sort of gone from sequential, long duration projects, well defined, everybody's got a role within it, these roles are well mapped out. And from a project planning perspective, a sequential model is really easy, well, really easy, but it is the easiest way of managing and structuring a project. Because you can say, I need these people at this time, in this location, doing this. Gives an awful lot of perceived, emphasize that word, perceived control. Because it works on the perception that you truly understand everything about the product that you are building and its impact and how it will work. So clearly that doesn't work. We've got to move into Agile. So lots of organisations transforming into Agile. An interesting fact I'm finding out is that companies that are less than 10 years old using graduates that are, or relative newbies into IT, let's say less than 30 odd years old, a lot of them have never ever experienced a sequential delivery model. All they know is Agile. That is all they do. To them, waterfall is it's an anachronism. They don't know what it is. Why would anybody do it? Because the whole structure the whole approach is in Agile. And then some organisations, and there's an awful lot of talk going on at the moment around DevOps. Interestingly enough, I was at a HP conference talking to 120 people there, and asked how many people were actually doing DevOps. Not talking about it, not planning the move, but actually delivering it. There were only 5 out of 120. The analogy with teenage sex is there, you know, lots of people talking about it, but few doing it. But I think that's changing. It's changing very, very quickly. Because what I'm finding, and I'm talking to some companies who are doing the DevOps, their problem is the converse of a sequential model. For them is, how do we fit in all of the testing that we need to do? How do we make this as efficient and as effective as possible in the really short periods of time we do? The thing with DevOps is that it does undermine business. For those incumbents still working in a sequential model where you've got 2 to 3 year program of work to get you into a point where you can deliver something. Startups doing DevOps are putting products out there in weeks. I was just talking at lunchtime with a company who produced a payment portal that in the space of 7 months they were taking in £5 million worth of business and had swept the rug from underneath of the top 5 banks because they were all thinking about producing a payment portal, whereas this organisation had gone away, done it, built it, implemented it and rolled it out to some websites where they were using it. And that's with a development team of 10, everything's cloud hosted, all of the development's cloud hosted, everything's out in the cloud. They're spinning things up as quickly as they can, as they need to, drag it down and move on. What was happening is that these banks were turning around and going, we can't compete with that, we'll just buy the company. So it's, the pressures are there, because the business is going, great, oh, so you mean that change I wanted, I can have it tomorrow? Oh, great. Why are these guys telling me 3 months or 6 months or a year? So what's been the test response to this? So, sequential, for those people with the gravitas of having experienced this, it's, it's usually an independent test team with your structured testing, so you put your junior testers through to your senior testers through to your test managers, program test managers. You've got teams focusing on specific test levels, so you may have your performance testing team, your security testing team, your system testing team, system integration team. I can keep going. But all with their own requirements that they've got up front, that they're using to do manual test analysis of, they're generating out tests, they're getting peer reviewed. Familiar story. Agile's caused a bit of a problem. Because if you're using that traditional model, the temptation is to actually start running mini waterfall projects as part of your Agile. So you do all of your development, then you do all of your testing and try and shoehorn it into a sprint. For those people who were at the test automation roundtable, I apologise for getting onto my reports about that. But for the rest of you, have a look at the Agile principles. If you look at the Agile manifesto, everybody's usually familiar with the Agile manifesto and its 4 statements. Go to the bottom of the page and it says Agile principles. Go to the Agile principles, there's 12 principles. Have a look at that, read through that. They are actually the most useful guide to how to do Agile that you can see anywhere on the web. It's not, they're not trying to push you a model, a methodology or anything. They're just saying, here are 12 statements, again in that very positive Agile language, about what you should try and do. If you can meet those, you're on the winner. And one of those is to deliver working software. So what you need to do as an organisation, as a team, as an individual is understand what does working really mean. The more you abstract the word working, the more problems you will have. So, a lot of things with Agile, one of the other aspects of that is that you now have the notion of an Agile practitioner, or as a technology engineer, a development engineer. The job titles are changing. Most organisations still have the notion of a tester. But the role of the tester within Agile is changing in that they may rarely run most of the tests. Your developers, your BA, your product owner, other people within the team may well be running a lot of the tests. Because if you just rely on your one tester to test what 8 other people have developed, you're in into a bottleneck. But your testing becomes an advisory role. And then you move into DevOps. Well, within DevOps, they usually just call themselves engineers nowadays. There is no job title of a tester. Does it mean that they do no testing? Absolutely not. But then what can the tester do? One of the things that's appearing in the market now is this term quality engineering. So it's no longer just talking about test automation, but it's about engineering quality into the whole process. So how do we automate, how do we structure a process to make it repeatable and reliable, and then how do we automate that process so that we engineer in quality? So as Scott said early this morning, if you automate chaos, you just get more chaos. Whereas if you're engineering in quality, and what I mean by that is you're engineering things like builds of your environments, your deployment, using containerization, like using tools like Docker, for instance. All of these things need to be built. Who else is going to build them? Okay. So, what's changed in testing? So, what I've done is I've actually taken, there's an ISO standard in software testing, ISO 29119, published about 3 years ago, and it's still it is a very useful, valuable document about the sorts of things you should always consider to do with testing. I know that some people in the market, say, "Oh, we can't standardise this." No, it's an engineering practice. If we're proclaiming that IT is an engineering practice, then we've got standards to help support that. It doesn't mean that you have to adhere to everything in that standard, but it acts like a volume of work that you can refer to. So, going from there, so planning. So traditional models of test planning, you have a documented policy, documented strategy, then you go into your test plans. Some of your test plans, worst case, 300-400 pages long, take 4 or 5 months to get reviewed, updated, tweaked, retweaked, republished. You've still not done any testing, but you've got a plan. That will change anyway. What you're moving to is that actually you no longer need individual test plans. They're part of your overall development lifecycle. We're not talking about trying to pull out a test plan. My argument has always been with a test plan. I'll produce you a test plan as soon as you produce me a development plan. If you can show me everything that I've got in my test plan and produce me a development plan, then my test plan will be valid and I know it will work. Don't know of many people that do development plans, and don't know many developers that would ever want to be that constrained to it. But the recognition is actually things are fluid. But discussing and understanding what you need strategically to be able to deliver is important. But not necessarily documented. Design. So, I mentioned this already, manual design usually. There are some business model processing tools out there now. And I think we'll see more and more of them coming. You know, you test a design, review, you know, you build it right down your detailed test steps, you give it to your offshore team, who then don't follow it, they then feed back, and raise defects, and you go around the loop again and again. Whereas now, actually we don't have time necessary to do all of the design work that we want to. That's a challenge. That is a challenge, and this is where I think one of the roles going forward for a tester is to make sure that the right levels of testing are happening at the right time within your process. You automate straight into test. Some organisations actually write no manual tests. They go straight into writing the test automation. As the code arrives, they run the automation. If the automation fails, they either update the automation or update it, or it's a change that needs to go back into the process. We'll talk about changes in a minute. So your test execution, at best, under existing sort of sequential models, and what's traditionally done, is manual, ideally with some automated regression testing. What we're moving to is automated testing with some manual exploratory testing. And there's an interesting one down here about testing in production. Some organisations will not test anything manually, go straight into production, and then it's all automated though, all the automated testing gets pushed into production, and then they start filtering traffic on their website, start filtering up 1 or 2 percent of the traffic onto the new servers, and they track and monitor exactly what the users are doing. And if they're all dropping off, let's say it's Amazon and you're doing your one-click payment, and they're finding that they've got a high dropout rate on the one-click point in the process, what they'll do is immediately swap people onto the new platform. They'll send out an email a few days later saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, you may have experienced some problems with our site the other day." They will never know why, and it gives them a little voucher. As a user, you don't know, but you've just tested their system, you found a defect for them, and they've just pulled it. But as the user, you never experience it. But you've got to have the right systems in place to do that. I think the use of exploratory testing is going to become more and more key, because you don't have time to write out all of the different test cases you may have. Reporting, we've got defects, defect management systems, daily reports, weekly reports, test closure report, all the rest of it. Now, actually, some organisations have no such thing as a defect. All they have is change. Doesn't matter what type of change it is, they'll just change it. And some DevOps processes, it's so quick to fix that they don't even bother recording, they just fix it and rerun the testing. Reporting real time, use of tools like Kibana, without stacking all the other aspects of that. Brilliant. You see real time running of tests. You can monitor it on a dashboard as it's moving. You can capture things as it's happening. Dynamic reporting that's open source. And then finally, environment. Static, long lead time, 6 to 9 months sometimes to produce the right environment, not fully integrated. Costs you a few million. But a lot of these systems, they're now moving into automated build using tools like Docker, deploy, remove. So you basically, in the space of an hour, let's say, your continuous integration build is done. Developers are happy that all of the unit component testing is done. It then automatically triggers Docker, which will spin up an environment for you. Then it will automatically trigger your test. Your tests run automatically. Unless there's any major problems, it will then finish off your testing, strip down the environment, close it all off, and you're left with nothing again. But you've got a full test run, full regression test run, without one person touching it. All automated. And this is happening now. And that presents both challenges as testers and as business. Because if you can't deliver that quickly, somebody else is going to take the business on if it's valuable enough. So to finish off, I've got a minute or two. 2 minutes, right. Testing is evolving. I'm sure you guys have seen that. Testing is becoming ever more technical, whether you like it or not. I think if you're a non-technical tester, then there are some interesting challenges coming ahead. Things like learning how to write code if not how to structure it. Learn how to do some test automation, even if it's just a little bit. Learn about exploratory testing. So even if you don't want to go down the automation coding side, can you offer anything else of value? Things like exploratory testing, or understanding test design so well that you can advocate for others. So things like practicing your consultancy skills. Learn about CI. Learn about Jenkins. It's all out. There's lots of information out there. Don't wait for people to put you on a course on this, because there's a lot of people out there who aren't waiting for courses. They go away, learn it. The thing with a lot of these tools, they're open source, so people are even downloading and building it and trying it out at home. And then for test managers, well, my background is mainly as a test manager, a program test manager, and it is tough out there. There are fewer and fewer jobs out there for a test manager, because as people are moving to Agile or DevOps, why do you need a test manager? I'm being provocative. You know, so things like becoming a test practice lead. So, you know, if you're doing the Spotify approach with your cohorts and all of that, or using SAFe, any of those models, they always have a practice lead. Someone who encourages and enables best practices or good practices within the organisation. How do you tailor testing to make it work for the context of a specific project or team? So there's options there. I'm not being flippant, but a lot of test managers have become Scrum Masters or have moved into project management. Because a good test manager and a good program test manager, I think, is probably more qualified than a lot of project managers out there. Because you not only understand the whole process, but you understand the technical aspects of it and the nuances of what failing to do something really means. So you're very, very well placed in some of these. Or move into more around the process improvement, quality engineering aspects. What does that all mean? It means inevitably that every single one of us will have to change how we work in some way. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.